Syria's military story is one of the most dramatic in modern history. From the tanks that rolled through the Golan Heights to the missiles hidden in underground tunnels, from a navy that once ruled the eastern Mediterranean coast to jets that fought Israel 3 times. This is every major Syrian weapon, vehicle, aircraft, and warship ever fielded. Main battle tanks: T-34-85, Syria's very first tank. Received from the Soviet Union in the 1950s, this legendary World War II-era machine was what Syrian crews drove into the 1967 Six-Day War. By modern standards, it was completely outclassed, but it was what Syria had, and it formed the original backbone of the entire armored force. T-54, an early Cold War Soviet tank. The T-54 arrived in Syrian hands in the late 1950s and 1960s. It featured a 100mm gun and a low, rounded turret that became iconic in Middle Eastern warfare. Syrian T-54s fought in the Six-Day War and were handed to various Palestinian factions during the Lebanese conflicts. T-55. The workhorse of Syrian armor for decades, the T-55 came in massive numbers courtesy of the Soviet Union. Sporting a 100mm rifled gun and thick cast armor, it served in every major Syrian conflict: 1967, 1973, Lebanon 1982, and even the civil war beginning in 2011. Syria ran thousands of these machines, and many were still in service when the Assad regime fell. T-62, a step up from the T-55, the T-62 introduced a powerful 150mm smoothbore gun, the first smoothbore tank cannon in history. Syria deployed these heavily in the brutal 1973 Yom Kippur War on the Golan Heights, where hundreds were destroyed or captured by Israel. Russia later resupplied Syria with upgraded T-62M variants, some of which were still being committed to battle during the Civil War. T-72, Syria's most modern and capable tank. Delivered in large numbers by the Soviet Union starting in the 1980s, the T-72 became the crown jewel of the Syrian Armored Corps. Armed with a 125mm smoothbore gun and fitted with reactive armor packages, Russia resupplied Syria with T-72s and upgraded variants throughout the Civil War. The T-72 Ural, T-72A, T-72AV, and T-72B all served in Syrian colors, and it was the last tank still defending the Assad regime in 2024. T-90 Russia delivered a small number of T-90 tanks directly to Syria around 2015 to 2016 as part of battlefield support during the Civil War. The most modern tank ever to serve in the Syrian army, the T-90 featured advanced Contact 5 explosive reactive armor and a gun capable of firing anti-tank missiles. Their numbers were always small, but their appearance on Syrian battlefields made international headlines. Armored fighting vehicles and personnel carriers. BMP-1, Syria's primary infantry fighting vehicle for decades. The BMP-1 was a revolutionary Soviet design that allowed mechanized infantry to fight from inside the vehicle using a 73mm gun and an anti-tank missile. Syria received hundreds of these, and they formed the mechanized spine of most Syrian army formations throughout every major conflict. BMP-2, an upgraded version of the BMP-1 with a 30mm autocannon replacing the older gun. The BMP-2 gave Syrian infantry fighting vehicles much more effective anti-aircraft and light vehicle suppression capability. These were delivered later in the Cold War period and remained in service through the Civil War. BTR-60, BTR-70, BTR-80. Syria operated the full BTR family of 8-wheeled armored personnel carriers. Faster and cheaper than tracked IFVs, these wheeled APCs transported infantry across deserts and cities alike. The BTR-80 was the most modern variant, featuring an improved turret and better protection. Thousands served in the Syrian army across all generations. BRDM-2, Syria's primary armored reconnaissance vehicle. Fast, amphibious, and armed with machine guns or anti-tank missiles, the BRDM-2 served in both a scouting role and as a launch platform for the Sagar and Spandrel anti-tank missile systems. Syria operated hundreds of them across various specialized variants. MTLB, a highly versatile Soviet multi-purpose tracked vehicle, the MTLB served in Syria as an armored personnel carrier, artillery tractor, and general-purpose battlefield taxi. Its low ground pressure made it valuable in rough terrain. During the Civil War, Syrian forces improvised several different weapon mounts onto MTLB hulls. ZSU-23 Shilka, one of Syria's most feared short-range air defense platforms. The Shilka combined 4 23mm autocannons on a tracked chassis with a fire control radar, creating a terrifying close-in defense against low-flying aircraft and helicopters. Syria deployed these extensively, and they became a major hazard for Israeli aircraft during the 1973 war, though Israel subsequently developed countermeasures. 2S-1 Gvozdika, a 122mm self-propelled howitzer built on a light-track chassis. The Gvozdika gave Syrian artillery units the ability to move and fire without setting up fixed positions. Syria operated significant numbers of these, giving mechanized formations organic, mobile fire support throughout all its major conflicts. 2S-3 Akatsia, a heavier 152mm self-propelled howitzer, the Akatsia delivered devastating fire support at longer ranges than the Gvozdika. Syria used these in the 1982 Lebanon War and the Civil War, often positioning them to conduct sustained bombardments of besieged urban areas. Artillery and rocket systems. D-30 howitzer, Syria's most common towed artillery piece. The Soviet 122mm D-30 was found everywhere in the Syrian army, firing from desert plains, city outskirts, and hastily prepared positions throughout the Civil War. Reliable and easy to use, it became one of the most photographed artillery pieces of the conflict. Syria even locally produced a self-propelled variant by mounting the D-30 on an old T-34 chassis. M46 field gun. A powerful Soviet 130mm towed field gun, the M46 was used extensively by Syria for long-range fire support along the Golan Heights. It had exceptional range for its era and remained in Syrian coastal defense batteries for decades, used to protect the Mediterranean coastline alongside anti-ship missiles. BM-21 Grad, the iconic Soviet 40-barrel 122mm multiple rocket launcher. Syria operated large numbers of BM-21s, and they became a defining weapon of the Civil War, capable of saturating an area with rockets in seconds. The terrifying wail of a Grad salvo became a sound deeply associated with the Syrian conflict. BM-27 Uragan, a heavier 220mm multiple rocket launcher delivering far more destructive rockets than the Grad. Syria's BM-27s were used to bombard rebel-held territory during the Civil War, and their large warheads caused massive destruction in populated areas. Their use was documented extensively by international observers. BM-30 Smerch, the most powerful rocket artillery system in the Syrian arsenal. The Smerch fires 300mm rockets to ranges exceeding 70 kilometers, capable of delivering cluster munitions, thermobaric warheads, or unitary high-explosive payloads. Syria's small number of these represented the pinnacle of its conventional rocket artillery capability. Gulan 1000, a domestically developed multiple-launch rocket system, the Gulan 1000 was one of Syria's own contributions to its rocket arsenal, documented in use against ISIS positions. It represented Syria's modest but real indigenous defense production capability through the Scientific Studies and Research Center. 9K-52 Luna M, Frog 7, Syria's original unguided battlefield rocket. The Frog 7 delivered a large warhead to ranges of up to 70 kilometers but with notoriously poor accuracy. Syria fired these during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. By later standards they were blunt instruments, but their large warheads made them psychologically and physically devastating. Ballistic missiles, Scud-B, R-17 Elbrus. Syria's first ballistic missile. Received from the Soviet Union in the 1970s, the Scud-B could hurl a nearly 1-ton warhead to ranges of around 300 kilometers. Syria used Scud-Bs during the 1973 war and, most infamously, fired them repeatedly at rebel-held areas during the Civil War beginning in 2012. The first confirmed Scud use against a country's own population in history. Scud-C, an improved Scud with extended range pushing toward 500 kilometers. Syria received these and eventually began producing its own version locally at underground facilities near Hama, designated the Golan 1, a locally manufactured Scud-C clone built with North Korean assistance and capable of carrying chemical warheads. Scud-D, Golan 2, Syria's most advanced Scud derivative. The Golan 2 was a domestically upgraded version of the Scud-D, with range reportedly extended to 850 kilometers. Developed by the Syrian Scientific Studies and Research Center with North Korean technical assistance, it represented Syria's attempt to build a genuine strategic deterrent against Israel. OTR-21 Toshka, SS-21 Scarab, a far more accurate Soviet tactical ballistic missile than the Scud family. Syria received both the original Toshka and the upgraded Toshka-U, with the latter achieving accuracies of around 90 meters. Syrian forces fired Toshkas repeatedly during the Civil War against rebel gatherings and command centers, and famously fired 2 near the Israeli border in 2018, prompting Israel to launch David's Sling interceptors. KN-02 Toksa, a North Korean solid-fueled short-range ballistic missile derived from the Tochka. Syria acquired a quantity of these from North Korea, and their use was documented in the Civil War, including a 2021 strike on an oil facility in Idlib. The solid fuel gave the KN-02 a much faster launch time than liquid-fueled Scuds, making it harder to preemptively destroy. Fat-110, an Iranian-developed short-range ballistic missile, transferred to Syria via the Iran-Syria military partnership. With a range of around 300 kilometers and dramatically improved accuracy over the Scud family, the Fata-110 was among the most modern systems in Syria's arsenal before Israeli airstrikes eliminated much of the strategic missile stockpile in December 2024. Air Defense Systems S-75 Dvina, SA-2 Guideline. Syria's first major surface-to-air missile system and one of the most proliferated SAMs in history. The SA-2 was the weapon that made the world take ground-based air defense seriously after downing a U-2 over the Soviet Union. Syria deployed them extensively from the 1960s, and while Soviet-era aircraft could largely defeat them by the 1980s, they remained in the inventory for decades. S-125 Neva, SA-3 Goa. A low-altitude complement to the SA-2, the S-125 was designed to engage aircraft flying below the SA-2's engagement envelope. Syria used these in the 1973 war, where they claimed several Israeli aircraft. Many remained in service well into the Civil War era, some modified with improved guidance systems. S-200 Vega, SA-5 Gammon. Syria's long-range air defense system, capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 250 kilometers and altitudes over 35,000 meters. The S-200 gave Syria the theoretical ability to threaten Israeli aircraft over Israeli territory. A Syrian S-200 shot down a Russian L-20 intelligence aircraft in 2018 during a confused engagement, causing a major diplomatic incident with Moscow. Buk M2E, SA-17 Grizzly. Russia delivered a small number of Buk M2E medium-range air defense systems to Syria, representing a significant modernization of its ground-based air defense. The Buk M2E is a mobile, all-weather system capable of engaging aircraft, cruise missiles, and tactical ballistic missiles. These systems were priority targets for Israeli airstrikes throughout the Civil War era. Pantsir S-1E Russia delivered Pantsir S-1 systems to Syria as both a counter to Israeli precision strikes and a close-in protection layer for higher-value SAM systems. The Pantsir combines a 30mm autocannon with short-range missiles into a single mobile unit. Despite its modern design, Syrian Pantsir systems were repeatedly destroyed by Israeli drone and missile strikes, exposing limitations in their effectiveness. S-300 PMU-2, SA-20 Gargoyle. Following the accidental shootdown of the Russian Il-20 in 2018, Moscow delivered the long-range S-300 PMU system to Syria as a punitive response and strategic deterrent. This was a significant escalation. The S-300 can engage targets at ranges of up to 200 kilometers. Israel was deeply opposed to the transfer, and the system's operational readiness under Syrian crews remained questionable throughout its brief operational life before the 2024 strikes. Zu-23-2, Syria's most ubiquitous short-range anti-aircraft weapon, a towed, twin-barrel 23mm autocannon. Cheap, simple, and found literally everywhere across the Syrian military. During the Civil War, Zu-23-2s were mounted on virtually every type of vehicle and used for both anti-air and ground fire support. Both government and rebel forces used them extensively. Fixed-wing combat aircraft. MiG-15, MiG-17, Syria's first jet fighters, received from the Soviet Union in the mid-1950s. The MiG-15 arrived as Czech-built copies shortly after Syrian independence. These subsonic jets formed the first generation of the Syrian Air Force and were flown in early clashes with Israel before being superseded by far more capable aircraft. MiG-21 Fishbed. The legendary supersonic Soviet fighter that became Syria's workhorse for decades. Syria received the MiG-21 in numerous variants, interceptors, ground attack models, and trainers, and flew them in every major conflict from 1967 onward. Hundreds were delivered over the years, and despite losing enormous numbers to Israeli aircraft in 1982 over Lebanon, MiG-21s remained in Syrian service right up until the fall of the Assad regime. MiG-23 Flogger. Syria operated the largest MiG-23 fleet outside the Soviet Union itself, eventually accumulating around 150 aircraft across multiple variants. The swing-wing MiG-23 served as an interceptor in the MF variant and a ground attack aircraft in the BN variant. The 1982 Lebanon War saw catastrophic losses. Israel claimed 85 Syrian MiGs destroyed in 6 days of aerial combat, the majority being MiG-23s. MiG-25 Foxbat. One of the fastest aircraft ever built, the MiG-25 served Syria in both interceptor and reconnaissance bomber roles. Syria received the formidable MiG-25 PD interceptor and MiG-25RB reconnaissance bomber, operating 4 squadrons at their peak. Capable of Mach 2.8 plus and flying above 20,000 meters, the MiG-25 represented Syria's most extreme air superiority asset. MiG-29 Fulcrum, Syria received around 24 MiG-29s from the Soviet Union, fielding one of the most capable dogfighters of the Cold War era. The MiG-29's combination of helmet-mounted sighting, R-73 short-range missiles, and a powerful radar made it genuinely dangerous. Syria hoped to upgrade its fleet to the MiG-29 M2 standard before the civil war derailed all modernization plans. Su-22 fitter Syria's primary dedicated ground attack jet. The variable sweep Su-22 carried large external bomb loads and unguided rockets, making it the aircraft most associated with the Syrian Air Force's brutal bombing campaigns during the civil war. Su-22s flew thousands of sorties, and Syria was one of the last air forces in the world still operating the type before the regime's collapse. Su-24 Fencer, Syria's only all-weather strike aircraft and its most capable offensive platform. The Su-24 could deliver precision munitions in darkness and bad weather, a capability no other Syrian aircraft possessed. Around 20 Su-24 Mk aircraft were in Syrian service, representing the highest-end strike capability of the entire Air Force. L-39 Albatross, a Czech-built advanced jet trainer also used in a light attack role by Syria during the Civil War. L-39s were documented dropping improvised bombs on rebel positions, a sign of how stretched Syrian air assets had become. Helicopters. Mi-8 HIP, Syria's most numerous helicopter. Originally designed as a troop transport, the Mi-8 HIP was pressed into service as a gunship by mounting rockets and machine guns on its sides. Most infamously, Mi-8s were used to drop barrel bombs, oil drums filled with explosives and shrapnel, over rebel-held neighborhoods, causing immense civilian casualties. Mi-17. The military upgrade of the Mi-8, the Mi-17 featured more powerful engines and improved reliability. It formed the backbone of Syrian Army aviation transport and continued the barrel bomb missions of its predecessor. Some Mi-17s survived the December 2024 Israeli strikes and were operated by Syria's new transitional government as of early 2025. Mi-24, Mi-25 Heinz, Syria's dedicated attack helicopter. The Mi-25 is the export version of the Mi-24D, featuring a 4-barrel heavy machine gun under the nose, rocket pods, and anti-tank missile capability. During the Civil War, Mi-24s were the Assad regime's most feared rotary wing weapon, used to strike rebel positions, ambush columns, and support ground offensives. At least one Mi-24 was deployed in combat by Syria's new transitional government in March 2025. Mi-14 Hayes, Syria's amphibious anti-submarine warfare helicopter. Equipped with torpedoes, sonobuoys, and a search radar, the Mi-14 was primarily intended to hunt submarines, threatening Syria's Mediterranean coastline. Several Mi-14s were photographed operational at Istomo Air Base in late December 2024, surviving the initial Israeli strikes. Ka-27, Ka-28 Soviet-designed naval helicopters used by Syria for anti-submarine warfare in support of the Syrian Navy. The Ka-28 is the export version delivered to Syria, featuring a distinctive coaxial rotor design. Syria received 4 Ka-28s to replace older 25s, using them for ASDU patrols over the eastern Mediterranean. SA-342 Gazelle, Syria's only non-Soviet helicopter. The French-built Gazelle was purchased in 1977 specifically for anti-tank missions. Armed with hot anti-tank missiles, the Gazelle proved deadly in the 1982 Lebanon War, where Syrian Gazelles stopped an Israeli tank column cold with precision missile strikes near Ain Zahalta. Over 60 were delivered, making them a notable component of Syrian rotary wing capability. Naval vessels. Petya 3 class frigates. Syria's largest warships. 2 Petya 3 class frigates form the heavy surface combat backbone of the Syrian Navy. Soviet-built and designed primarily for anti-submarine warfare, they were armed with torpedoes, depth charges, and light guns. By any modern measure, they were antiquated, but they represented Syria's most capable blue water surface assets. OSA-1, OSA-2 class missile boats, the true striking power of the Syrian Navy. Fast attack craft armed with P-15 Termit, Styx, anti-ship missiles, the OSA class was what made the Syrian Navy genuinely dangerous in coastal waters. Syria operated both generations, the OSA-1 and the upgraded OSA-2, and these boats participated in the 1973 Battle of Latakia, the first naval combat in history where both sides used anti-ship missiles. Israel's electronic countermeasures defeated every Syrian missile launched. In December 2024, Israeli naval forces sank 6 Osa-class boats at their moorings in Latakia, effectively ending the Syrian Navy as a fighting force. IPS-18 TR-2 missile boats. 6 Iranian-supplied fast attack craft delivered to Syria in 2006, based on a North Korean design. Armed with C-802 anti-ship missiles, these Iranian-origin boats were based at Minet al-Baida, north of Latakia, and represented a modest modernization of Syria's fast attack capability. Juk-class patrol boats. 8 Soviet-supplied small patrol craft used for coastal surveillance and territorial water enforcement. Too small for serious combat, the Juk class served as Syria's eyes along its coastline, intercepting smugglers and monitoring maritime traffic. Project 613, Romeo-class submarines. Syria's submarines, one of the least known aspects of its military. 3 Romeo-class diesel-electric submarines were transferred from the Soviet Navy in 1985. Aging and difficult to maintain, they were used primarily for crew training and ASW exercises rather than genuine patrols. Their operational status was questionable for most of their service life, and they are believed to have been decommissioned long before the regime's collapse. Minesweepers. Syria operated a small number of Soviet-supplied minesweepers at Tartus, responsible for keeping the approaches to Syria's main ports clear of naval mines. These unglamorous vessels formed a critical part of Syrian port security alongside its missile boat fleet. Coastal defense systems. K-300P Bastion P. Syria's most modern and dangerous coastal defense system. The Bastion P fires the P-800 Onyx, also known as the Yakhant, supersonic anti-ship missile to ranges exceeding 300 kilometers at Mach 2.5. Russia delivered these systems to Syria in 2011 over strong US and Israeli objections. A single salvo of Onyx missiles could theoretically threaten any warship in the eastern Mediterranean. Israel prioritized the destruction of these systems in its December 2024 strikes. SSC-1B Sepal, P-5 Piatiorka. An older generation coastal defense cruise missile, the Sepal had an enormous range of around 700 kilometers, one of the longest-ranged missiles in Syria's entire coastal arsenal. These were legacy Soviet-era systems and well past their operational prime, but their sheer range made them theoretically dangerous to distant naval targets. SSN-2 Styx, P-15 Termit. The same missile fitted to Syria's Osa-class boats, but also deployed in shore-based batteries. Syria operated multiple shore-launched batteries of Styx missiles to protect its coastline independently of the naval fleet, creating overlapping fields of anti-ship missile coverage along its Mediterranean coast. Anti-tank weapons. 9 M14 Malutka, AT-3 Sagar, the wire-guided anti-tank missile that shocked Israel in 1973. Syrian infantry deployed thousands of Sagars across the Golan Heights, and their use in the opening days of the Yom Kippur War destroyed hundreds of Israeli tanks. The Sagar became globally famous as proof that infantry could defeat armor, fundamentally changing tank warfare doctrine worldwide. 9 M113 Konkurs, AT-5 Spandrel. A more advanced Soviet wire-guided anti-tank missile that replaced the Sagar in Syrian service. Mounted on BRDM-2 vehicles and in infantry configurations, the Konkurs offered greater range and accuracy and could defeat most contemporary tank armor. Syria deployed these across its anti-tank formations from the 1980s onward. 9 M133 Kornet, AT-14 Spriggan, Russia's most modern laser-guided anti-tank missile and the most capable in the Syrian arsenal. The Kornet's tandem warhead can defeat any tank in the world, including those with explosive reactive armor. Syrian forces used Kornet missiles extensively during the civil war, and disturbingly, stocks of these missiles reportedly made their way to Hezbollah via Syrian territory, becoming a major Israeli security concern. SPG-9 Recoilless Rifle. A ubiquitous 73mm recoilless rifle used by virtually every faction in the Syrian civil war. Originally a standard infantry anti-tank weapon, the SPG-9 was mounted on pickup trucks and light vehicles throughout the conflict. Cheap, effective, and available in enormous numbers, it became one of the defining images of the Syrian battlefield. B-10 Recoilless Rifle. An older 82mm recoilless rifle that predated the SPG-9 in Soviet service. Syria kept large numbers of these in its inventory, and they were actively used in the civil war for engaging buildings, fortifications, and light vehicles at close range. Small arms and infantry weapons AK-47, AKM, AK-74M. The standard rifle of the Syrian Arab Army across every generation of service. Syria operated the original AK-47, the modernized AM, and eventually the AK-74M in 5.45mm caliber. Millions of these rifles circulated through Syrian military and paramilitary forces, and the civil war saw them spread to every faction on every side of the conflict. Zastava M70, a Yugoslav-manufactured AK variant widely used by Syrian forces. Large quantities of Eastern Bloc small arms from multiple Warsaw Pact countries found their way into Syrian service, and the M70 was among the most common foreign rifles in the inventory. Type 56, Type 81, Chinese-manufactured AK variants, acquired by Syria, adding to the extraordinary variety of Kalashnikov family weapons in circulation. The Type 56 assault rifle and Type 56-1 folding stock variant both served Syrian forces in significant numbers. PKM machine gun. The standard Soviet general-purpose machine gun, firing the 7.62 by 54mm cartridge from a belt. Every Syrian infantry unit had PKMs, and like the AK series, they spread to all factions during the civil war. Reliable, accurate at range, and lethal, the PKM remained the backbone of Syrian fire support at squad and platoon level. DSHK heavy machine gun. The 12.7mm heavy machine gun that served every armored vehicle in the Syrian fleet, mounted on tanks as commander's weapons, on BTRs and BMPs, and on improvised gun trucks. The DSHK has been in Syrian service since the 1950s and continued firing through every conflict the country ever fought. RPG-7, Syria's standard infantry rocket launcher, and probably the single most important weapon in the entire civil war. The RPG-7 was used to destroy tanks, vehicles, buildings, and fortifications by literally every faction involved in the Syrian conflict. Cheap, powerful, and available in seemingly unlimited supply, it defined the visual aesthetic of the Syrian battlefield like no other weapon.